somebody please land this plane. Well, Florida with the win again. Seems to always be Florida or Texas at this point, but Florida with the win again. A Florida judge ends the federal mask mandate on airplanes. Didn't seem like that's even possible, but this has happened. And a Democratic representative from another state questions freedom religion also on airplanes. I'm at Odegaard. Welcome to Church Public. All right, welcome back to Church Public. I am Matt Odegaard, your host, and I am so glad that you have joined me here today. There's just a lot going on in the world, but I thought these two stories were interesting, both because they refer to airplanes and because they epitomize all of the craziness that's going on in the world today. So before we get to those two stories about airplanes, I'd just like to thank you for being part of this channel, for liking, subscribing, and if you wouldn't mind, if this helps you at all, or you feel like someone else needs to hear this information, and especially stay tuned for the Bible at the end. We always end with Bible and why this all matters. I think there's an especially motivating, helpful, encouraging message at the end, so do stay till the end for that, or just skip forward if you don't want to hear all the rest of this stuff. But thank you for liking this, for sharing it, and if you would share it with one other person, if you feel like it's helpful, I would really appreciate it, because that's the only way that this gets out there. It's not about me. I don't really care so much about me. I just want people to understand who Jesus is, how to follow him, and how to live in this crazy world. So without further ado, let's get to some of the craziness that's happening in the world today. So you may have heard that the federal mask mandate has been ended on airplanes and trains and other government transportation. Airplanes, of course, is the biggest one. Some of us still go around on trains. I probably haven't been on a train for a long time. When I lived in the Northeast, I did a little bit just to have some fun with the family, but generally not traveling by train. Most of you probably the same way, who knows. But airplanes, I mean, we all have to use them, and it's been sort of ridiculous, this whole masking on airplanes thing, since the beginning of 2 weeks to slow the spread, if you don't remember that. And if you missed, I actually had a kind of sad conversation with somebody just yesterday before all of this happened, because the mask mandate was set to end on the airplanes. But then the administration and the CDC once again said just 2 more weeks that we have to wear masks to slow the spread on the airplanes. I'm not kidding. That's actually what happened. That's the note that came out from the CDC and from the administration. Just 15 more days. Just 15 days to slow the spread. It's almost like I heard that somewhere before. Yeah, that 15 days turned into like 977 days, whatever it was. I lost count. I stopped counting. I don't care anymore. But we have to talk about this because it is important, because finally this Florida judge steps up and ends the mandate on the planes. So a federal judge in Florida has voided the Democrat President Joe Biden's national mask mandate, that was a mouthful, in which that it was placed in airports and airplanes and other forms of public transportation, as I mentioned, trains and buses and things like that. But that has been ended, according to the AP. Quote, the decision Monday by U.S. District Catherine Kimball Mizell, probably not pronouncing that right, but I'm taking a stab at it. So she's a judge in Tampa, and she said the CDC improperly failed to justify its decision and did not follow proper rulemaking. That was what the AP reported. They went on to say the CDC recently extended the mask mandate, which was set to expire on April 18th. Again, it was set to expire, but then it was extended just 15 more days until May 3rd to allow more time to study the BA.2 Omicron subvariant, gamma, wada, long, ding dong. I don't know. At this point, we're just adding weird names to it. But this is apparently that new variant is responsible for the majority of the cases in the U.S. And again, we've talked on and on about hospitalization and flu-like illness, and I'm not going to cover any of that today. But Judge Mizell ruled that the mandate, quote, exceeded the CDC's statutory authority, improperly invoked the good cause exception to notice and comment rulemaking, and failed to adequately explain its decisions, end quote. That was a mouthful, but essentially she's saying that CDC didn't prove that these 15 extra days were necessary, because they're not. So this was a lawsuit that was put in by Florida, along with, I think, something like 19 other states. It was something like 19 or 20 states. A couple of the states were Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Georgia. I'm not going to read all the states. You can go and look them up. But a lot of states signed on to this lawsuit months and months and months ago to say that, hey, especially on airplanes, we don't need this anymore. And if you recall, you may or may not remember that even the airline CEOs petitioned the Biden administration and said, hey, our airplanes have the best filtration kind of on the planet, and it's pretty much the safest place you could actually be. And that, of course, was thrown in the trash can or something. Nobody seemed to care that that was actually the quote-unquote science. I know we're not allowed to say that anymore, but apparently that is what the CEOs said. Nobody seemed to care. So these states said to the CDC and the federal government, hey, maybe we should let the science or people or whatever weigh in on some of this. So here's some of the airline statements that came out immediately after this decision. I got a couple of the statements here. This is American Airlines. In accordance with the Transportation Secretary, administration no longer enforcing the federal face mask mandate. Face masks will no longer be required. I'll skip from there. United Airlines, effective immediately, masks are no longer required. Delta Airlines, effective immediately, masks are optional. Southwest, as a result, effective immediately, employees and customers will be able to choose whether they want to wear a mask. Alaska, face masks have been like boarding passes for nearly 2 years. You couldn't fly without one. What a quote there, huh? Anyway, but as of today, masks are optional. JetBlue, in line with Monday's federal court ruling, et cetera, the mask wearing will now be optional. Spirit Airlines, face coverings are now optional. Frontier, I love how Frontier has the smallest statement here, but that's a side point. To mask or not to mask, the choice is yours. Like, I'm sorry, I have to pause for a second and laugh at how funny Frontier Airlines is packaging Shakespeare to be or not to be. Anyway, I find things funny. So Frontier Airlines, to mask or not to mask, the choice is yours. Masks are now optional. I'm just gonna laugh again. Like, okay, that's funny. All right, so that was what some people said about masks. Those were the airlines themselves weighing in on some of the masks. And my thoughts here, One, masks never worked. We know that. The science has shown that now. There's study after study after study, especially in children. Now, maybe I can give you the case that if you were infected with this, if you were older, if you were in a population that was struggling with it, maybe there is a case for them. But the reality is, and we've gone over these, that masks never really did anything. Number two, airplanes have had the best filtration on the planet since all of this began, and they have said as much, and we know that. And number three, just for common sense, if you are locked in a metal tube at 30,000 feet in the atmosphere for hours on end, I am pretty sure a face covering made of t-shirt material is not going to stop anything from going into your lungs. Just saying. Okay, that's enough of that, because I am tired of this whole mask shenanigans. But I do want to give you one more fun airplane story. This is a Twitter post, and this is a Twitter post by a Representative Ilhan Omar, and she posted that, here, I'll put the post up for you. She posted that, and this was during Holy Week. So we talked about Holy Week, and we talked about Easter, and we talked about Good Friday and what that all means, Palm Sunday. So this was her post. During Easter week, I think my family and I should have a prayer session next time I am on a plane. How do you think it will end? And of course, that's referring to the fact that she is a Muslim. And so she's talking about Muslim prayer and how that would go, because this video, which I'm going to show you in a second, is a worship leader on a plane singing a worship song and people on the plane singing along. Here you go. So, I mean, to me, pretty innocuous. One, I think it's amazing that they're doing that this worship leader stands up and does this, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But Ilhan Omar's response to seeing this video apparently is, I think my family and I, again, inferring Muslims, should have a prayer session next time I am on a plane, she wrote in a tweet. Now, the reason we have to talk about this is apparently it was passed on, retweeted, liked 36 million times. 36 million times. So this is not a small thing. This is not a small view. This is not a small issue. apparently this, on both sides, people are having strong feelings about it. And she goes on to say, how do you think it will end? I believe inferring that people would be upset if Muslims started worshiping on a plane. I'm not entirely sure. That's not super clear. I believe that's the inference that is going on here. So this video, I want to point a couple things out if you're not watching. It obviously happened before the mask mandate was lifted yesterday because no one on the plane is wearing a mask. So something else is going on here. We don't have the exact context of the video, but it appears that it was some kind of missions group because it appears that they chartered the plane, again, because no one is wearing masks, and they're singing about it. It may even be an old clip. There's some inference that this is from a long time ago. And it's possible because, I mean, I was singing that song in worship services. I am trying to calculate in my head 14, 15 years ago. I mean, that's not a new song by any standard. Still popular and still sung all over the place, but not new at all. And just for reference, no one is throwing rocks at the worship leader, well, except for United States representatives, who are obviously very tolerant and loving all of the time to all of the people. Thank you, Representative Ilhan Omar. And unfortunately, I guess it's as long as you agree with this representative and don't make any inference to the contrary, then you're fine. Wait, I'm just confused now. So here are some notable responses from some people on the internet to this. I think there's a couple here that are just worth mentioning. Ben Shapiro says, you can't whine about public practice of your religion, then demand respect for the public practice of your religion. As a religious Jew, he says this country is better with more of this, not less. I think that's a really fair take. Like, if you're going to say this public practice of religion is bad, but your public practice of religion is good, there's a little bit of a paradox there. Like, either both are okay or both are not okay. Several people, I won't read who they are, said that there are countries, for instance, if you went to and said you were a Christian or tried to do this in those countries, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, apparently Somalia, where she is from, you'd probably be arrested or worse. So that's a thing to keep into consideration, that, again, no one threw rocks at this worship leader. This whole plane of worshipers was not arrested. And the obverse is also true. If, for instance, Muslims started worshiping on a plane, praying on a plane, if Jews started praying on a plane, pretty much nothing would happen. Like, no one really cares. Again, the inference from the tweet, I guess, is that there would be an uprising of some sort. I don't know. I'm not really sure. There's also a couple of points here that, let's see, if you go to certain countries and get on the plane, they actually have prayers on the plane in the audio system or on the video screen. They actually have Muslim prayers on the plane in certain countries. So that's kind of a thing to keep note. And let's see, let's see if I can look up a couple of those here. Yeah, so, I mean, that's just part of what's going on in this. And then I want to get to this interesting article in response from, this is from NBC. This is an NBC article, and here, I'm gonna put up this because I searched to see what are some other people saying about this, because I don't want to be out to lunch. I mean, I have my view, and I'll share my view in a moment about it. But I want to hear what other people have to say, right? I don't want to be in my own echo chamber, which I could be, possibly. I want to hear what some other people have to say about this. So this is what NBC wrote about it, and well, let me do it backwards. I'll do it backwards here, because I pulled up the NBC article, and the NBC article says, "A plane full of singing Christians, a viral critique, and a very revealing backlash." So that's the article as you pull it up right at this second. However, when you search it, and this is the interesting thing about the internet, which I'm sure you have figured out at this point. People write things and then think twice about it and go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud. Seems to happen a lot these days. So when I was searching this, the search that actually came up for this NBC article that says the article title is "Ilhan Omar is right about the Christians singing on a plane." And if you're not watching, I'm putting that up on the screen here. This is the search. I just screencast the search. Ilhan Omar is right about the Christians singing on a plane video. But then, as I mentioned, now if you go to this article, it says a plane full of singing Christians, a critique, and a backlash. Now, those are two very different statements. So I'm going to read a little bit of this article in a second, but I think it's important to notice that there's two very different things going on here. And I think the first was the thing that you aren't supposed to say out loud, because you're not supposed to say that Ilhan Omar is right about singing Christians because singing Christians are bad, right? That's the implication here is singing Christians are bad on a plane, so we must denounce them and decry them and send them in the plane off into the local volcano or whatever, right? I mean, that's the inference here. But of course, an editor or somebody else was like, you can't post that, like you can't publish that. And so, of course, the headline changes to a plane full of singing Christians. Because that's kind of like, oh, those singing Christians. I can't believe they're singing Christians on a plane. That's bad. But that is much less bad than saying Ilhan Omar is right about these terrible, evil, bad singing Christians, right? Do you see the difference here? I think there's quite a difference. I think there's quite a difference in this. So I just want to read a little bit of this. And just the first line of this article says, in theory, the U.S. has a separation of church and state. In practice, public displays of Christianity. I'm giving like I hope you understand and appreciate. I'm giving like the boding and the foreboding and like ominous voice, because that's how I feel like this is written. I know I'm reading into this, so you can go and read this article if you want. You can search it up by either the title that I gave you previously or the one that they wrote and apparently scrapped. And just to prove my point, if you didn't look, I'll put it up one more time. The permalink, which is still there because I checked, is Ilhan Omar right, Christian singing plane. Like this is what they titled it, because if you've ever written anything on the internet, it automatically pulls what you title it first, and then you can change the title later. But this is what it was titled first. Ilhan Omar is right about the Christians singing on a plane. Okay, I've beat that to death. Anyway, so in theory, the U.S. has separation of church and state. In practice, public displays of Christianity are generally treated as wholesome. But non-Christian religions in the public sphere are often treated as curiosities or threats. Okay, so obviously, again, I had to do the ominous voice for that. And I'm not going to go into the full explanation of this, but in theory, the separation of church and state, it's not a theory. It's not real. It's never been real. People say it. We've used it. It's been upheld in court cases to remove Bible and prayer and all these other things from school. There is no separation of church and state other than the fact that the state is not allowed to impose a religion on the church. That's the way it was written. If you don't believe me, go and read the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. See if you can find those words, separation of church and state, in them. Hint, I'll give you a spoiler, save you a little bit of time. It's not in there. It's in a letter that was written about the writings, about the Constitution, saying that we needed to have this wall of separation. And the implication is so that the state does not impose a state religion on people, which is what the founders came from in England and some of the other countries, where the king would say, you have to worship this way, period, full stop. There is no other option. That's why people came to America. That's why the Puritans came to America in the first place. I've talked about that ad nauseum. It just continues to make me laugh that this is a talking point that people just keep going on. This separation of church and state needs to be a thing, and we need to separate these weird churchy people from the public square. Like, that's how this is used, right? This is used to say, if you have any kind of public worship, you are banished from the public square. You're only allowed to worship in private. And of course, the founders would laugh at this, and as I mentioned the other day, probably challenge you to a duel. This is not how they understood life. This is not how they understood holistic reality. And this is how holistic reality has been for, again, all of time. Religion is not something that you do in a closed closet in your house with no one else around. Religion is a public practice. By definition, it's a public practice. Religion is something, especially Christianity, where you go out and you meet with people who are outside of your home, because you could worship with your family. That's nice. You probably should actually do that. That's not Christianity. Christianity is gathering with the believers. Let us not give up gathering together. We have gone on and on about that verse, right? Why? Because it's about more than just you. It's about more than just your family. And where can you do that? You have to do that outside. You have to do that with other people. What does that mean? Oh, at some point, even though you may be in a church somewhere, you're in public. You're doing this in public. And our founders knew that. And our founders knew that that was actually the thing that needed to be protected. The expression of worship shall not be infringed. The expression, our doing worship, is the thing that's not supposed to be crushed down like these people keep trying to do, and citing the Constitution and other places by trying to do that. Anyway, I've gone on longer than I wanted to about that, because there's some other things. Because of course this article is saying that if you're Muslim and you go out in public, you're going to be demeaned, or perhaps worse, right? In America, if you're Muslim and you go out and you worship in public, that people are going to kill you for it. I haven't seen this happening. I mean, sure, there are some wacko weirdos that we should all condemn who do evil and violence. That's always bad. It doesn't generally happen in America. Yes, again, there are examples you can point to, but in general, all of the 330 million people in America were fairly okay with all of this happening, as evidenced by the fact that no one on this plane was arrested or shot when they landed. However, as I mentioned, go to another country that is maybe a little bit less tolerant, like Iran or China or Afghanistan or Somalia, where this representative ostensibly is from. You can't go out in the public square and pray to God. These are just things to keep in mind as you hear there's supposed to be this separation. We don't actually have freedom in America. No, I'm sorry. I'm calling it out on that. That's just it's a lie. It's false. We need to say the true things that are true. So that's an interesting point. And there was a couple other things that I wanted to hear here, let's see, talking about Christians a little bit. I'm just going to skip through a bunch of this. You can go and read the article if you want. I'm not going to pay that much attention to it, but there was a lot happening in this article. Here's a point that I thought was maybe telling of where it comes from, or maybe telling on what people want to do to eliminate Christianity from the public square, as I think was pointed out here. So this article says, sometimes Christian nationalism is silly and trivial, as in the yearly moral panic over whether you greet with Happy Holidays or Merry Christmas, as an assault on the fabric of America. Love the hyperbole in here. If you say Merry Christmas, you are assaulting America. This goes on to say, the article says, sometimes it is more ominous, as in the openly Christian effort to ban abortions, which happens to be in red in this article. I didn't screenshot it, but you can go and read it. Everything is in black and white, except for these red letters that say sometimes Christians. I'll quote it, as in the openly Christian effort to ban abortions, in red, in states across the country. And right now, in red also, anti-abortion rights activism has become central to the identity of many Christians in the U.S., especially white evangelical Christians. Ooh. And Catholics. Catholics is not in red, by the way. I'm not sure why the evangelical white Christians are bad, but Catholics, maybe not so bad. Bad, but not so bad, right? Okay. As a result, people of all faiths in conservative states are subject to this is in red again, theocratic dictates of the Christian right. Dun, dun, dun. I need sound effects here, right? Can someone, anyway, all right. I just love that. This is, so you and I, or maybe just me, are the theocratic dictators of the Christian right, because I like the Bible and what it says and try to live my life by it, because Christianity and the world and viewpoints are outside of me, and I don't get to invent my own reality, because reality kind of is reality. And I do believe that there is a God, and God is in control, because Jesus said, by the way, Jesus, this guy who went and suffered and died and then rose from the dead, as a human and as a God-man, I'm going to listen to him. And this is theocratic dictates. I mean, it is what it is. You guys called it out. But anyway, I just love how this article about a guy standing up and singing a song about God on a plane equals Christians trying to ban abortions and theocratic dictates. fantastic. This is just fantastic. It's like I had 0 to 100 in 5 seconds. But that's where we are, right? There is a battle, and the battle is not flesh and blood, as Paul tells us. The battle is against the powers and authorities and the people who just really, really don't want anything related to God. We have to create this wall of separation, right? Because we cannot have any of these silly, crazy, outlandish singing God people walking around in the streets or singing on planes. This is very, very bad, and we must stop it. He finishes the article, this writer, saying, as the backlash to Omar shows, Christian identity, politicians and activists love to complain about persecution. I'll skip a little bit here. And they can sweep politicians into office. They can force pregnant people to give birth and force you to listen to them sing 30,000 feet up in the air. So, I mean, I'll come back to the forcing people to listen to you sing in the air in a second, but don't miss, like, this is the thing that we have to pay attention to. It's the little things that matter. They really do. They make a difference. So this person says they can force pregnant people to give birth. They can force pregnant people to give birth. Just like, again, let that sink in. Let those words just like ring through your head. We, the theocratic dictator Christian nationalists, according to this article, want to force these poor pregnant people to give birth to these poor innocent children's. And by the way, pregnant people equals women? I mean, what's a pregnant person? Oh, this is that crazy definition that we've been talking about a lot at ChurchPublic. You got to get that pregnant people in there, that little jab, like, because trans women are women and they can also give birth, or trans men. I get confused at this point. I don't know. Anyway, I'm pretty sure only women can give birth because that's how God designed it in biology. But what do I know? I'm not a biologist. Anyway, we'll move on to these evil, terrible, white nationalist, theocratic, dictator Christians can force you to listen to them sing 30,000 feet up in the air. Here's my final thoughts. I'll try to wrap this up here. I've talked too much, and that maybe is part of my problem. But good for this guy. Good for this guy standing up and leading worship. I've done it. I've done worship a lot. I've done this song a lot. And sometimes it's a wonderful experience. Sometimes people don't like you. And if you've been anywhere in church or in leadership or even just exposed your Christian ideals to other humans on the planet, sometimes people don't like you. And I have been there. I've been challenged by a voodoo king, for lack of a better title. That happened to me when I was in Haiti, with a burning cross and all the things like that happened. And I've been challenged by satanic warlocks, self-proclaimed. These things have happened to me. But there's one thing for sure, regardless of who you are, and I'm not saying that's going to happen to you. I hope it doesn't. But you don't have to worry. And there is one thing for sure. When you lift up the name of Jesus, as the singer on this plane did, the powers of darkness take notice. And I applaud this guy for standing up and singing. And some people, if you go back and watch the clip and you know, you can rewind back and see it if you want. Some people were into it and singing. Some people look like they'd rather be taking a nap. I don't care. I mean, fine. Like, if you don't want to sing, don't sing. If you don't want to be part of this, don't be part of it. Again, it seems like it was a chartered flight. It's not like some guy who walked into one of these other airlines, ripped off his mask, and started singing worship songs. Because, as we know, up until like 12 hours ago, that person would have been tackled and arrested and thrown in prison. We know that because we saw stories like that over and over and over again. People who were protesting wearing the face covering were banned from flights, put on the terrorist no-fly list, and now we're saying on this chartered flight where apparently a bunch of Christians were singing worship songs, that is the end of our democracy. It's so ridiculous. And then you have people responding in the national news saying that the backlash shows that these Christians, terrible, evil, no good, very bad Christians, are forcing poor pregnant people to give birth and forcing you to listen to this worship music. They are strapping you down to the chair, you know, like taping your eyeballs open and tying your hands down so you can't plug your ears with your fingers, and saying you will listen to this worship music and you will like it. By the way, none of that happened at all. And apparently this was a plane full of Christians. So it boggles my mind. It really doesn't. I mean, it's obvious, but But it's interesting, ironic maybe for me to hear that they believe we are pushing down this religion so hard on them. And all I'm trying to say is, hey, this country was built for freedom of expression. You can worship how you want. And as Shapiro had pointed out, more worship is better. You can go worship however you want. Now, I also have the freedom to say, this style of worship that you want, like when this satanic warlock came up to me and had a conversation about his worship was better, we had some conversation about that, and I didn't think that particular style of worship was better. But at the end, we both walked away. Everybody was okay. I think he cursed me, but that's a side point. I'm covered by the blood of Jesus, so I'm not worried about that. And there's a lot of situations where people are going to be really upset when you stand up for the word of God. Jesus tells us this. Paul tells us this. Peter, John. I mean, pretty much all of the gospel writers and the writers of the epistles tell us that if you stand up for Jesus, this world's going to be against you. So here's where I want to end, and thank you if you have made it this far. I appreciate how much you have invested in this. I know your time is valuable, but I want to speak directly to those who are tired and weary and worn out and feel like the world is getting worse and worse and ending, and you just don't know what to do. I want to give you some words of encouragement from the Bible, because I think that's where our words of encouragement come from. So here's some encouragement from God's word. This is Paul in 2 Thessalonians. As for you, do not grow weary in doing good. And Paul says a similar thing to the Galatians. Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. That's Galatians 6:9. And of course, Jesus himself offers you this help. Come to me, all who labor, who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. And I think Paul sums all of that up best for us in this quote from Jesus. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in your weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest on me. 2 Corinthians 12:9. You don't have to do this all on your own. The world will be against you more and more and more as you follow after Jesus. And Jesus himself, through the power of the Holy Spirit, will give you strength. So take heart, rest in Jesus, and of course, keep the faith. I'm Odegaard, and this is Church Public.